Hi guys, welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be chatting about awful interview questions and how to answer them. My name's Hannah, I'm from Instant Impact, and if you don't know about us already, we are the UK's leading graduate recruitment agency, and we help place top graduates from around the UK into small, fast growth businesses, mainly in London. So we'll get started straight away. We're going to talk about awful interview questions today and chat about why interviewers use them, what the purpose of them is, and getting to the bottom of exactly why interviews use them as a technique to find out the best in candidates and see basically if you're ready and available for the job that you're applying for. The obvious reasons are, obviously things like interviewers want to see how you respond to pressure. They want to see how your thought processes and how you think comes through. And they also want to see if you can think on your feet. They're the kind of main reasons why interviewers use very tricky questions, very kind of spur of the moment things to really get to the bottom of your personality and your thought process. So when you're interviewing and during your application process, which for a graduate you could go to, many over the course of the months after you graduate, so you will come up against all different types of interviewers, and different people use different techniques to bring out the best in your character. So we've got a few that we would say that you should be a little bit wary of. The first is the good cop, bad cop situation. If you're ever in an interview situation where there are two people interviewing you at the same time. The good cop, bad cop is where somebody is really nice, open, friendly, and the other one is difficult and there to probe you and make you feel slightly more uncomfortable. So they kind of balance each other out in a nice way and put you into different situations and how you deal with them. So if an interviewer is being a bit too friendly and nice, be wary of this. Even though it can be very relaxing, make you feel in your comfort zone, you should be sometimes wary of it because it can encourage you to reveal perhaps a little bit too much information and maybe go a bit into things that to reveal at interview stage. Also be aware of aggressive interviewers. They're there to try and make you crumble, see how you respond under pressure, and to see if maybe you'll be able to fit into a fast-paced and driven environment in their team. One thing is to remember, though, if an interviewer is putting you through absolute hell and you leave the interview feeling terrible, perhaps that isn't the right environment for you. Perhaps that's not actually somewhere you want to work. So I would say that with some interviews, sometimes just be wary because it's not necessarily a good thing if you come out of an interview feeling absolutely awful and that you've been completely grilled to within an inch of your life. We always say that interviews should be a two-way process for both the interviewer and the candidate. And if at the end of it you can come out feeling positive about it, then that's a really good thing. So we have a few tips on what to prepare for weird questions. If you want some just general interview advice, I'd really recommend that you watch our webinar, which is titled How to Nail the Job Interview. And that's on our YouTube channel and features myself and also the director of Instant Impact. And we provide some really useful information from right at the beginning, before the interview, right up until the point where you go in the room, to the actual interview and how to prepare for certain questions that might come up. This one's a lot more to do with awful interview questions, and we've got some funny ones to share with you at the end about candidates' experiences and things that we've heard during our time as recruiters. But anyway, a few tips about when you get asked those awful questions and you're not sure what to do. It's a bit out of the blue, a bit of a shock. First of all is to plan beforehand before you go into the interview. Do some research because sites like Glassdoor are really great for getting the lowdown on an interview process before you go in. So you can avoid nasty surprises if you do your research. And there's other graduates and candidates that have done the same interview process as you have before you go in. Also think about the industry that you're interviewing for. If you're going for a creative role, for example, you'll get questions to prove that you were creatively minded. They'll want to see that coming through in your interview. So you can expect those kind of questions for the industry that you're going into. Next point is to stop and think. So always plan and think about your answer in full before speaking. A long pause isn't necessarily a bad thing in an interview, and always remember that time always goes so much more quickly when you're nervous. So actually just taking time to stop and think can be a really positive thing. It gives you plenty of time to structure your answer, think exactly about what it is that you want to communicate to the employer, and just taking that time can really make a difference to the answer and to your how you're perceived by the interviewer. You can also buy yourself more time by asking the interviewer to repeat it. And at the end of the day, if you are confused about the question, you can ask the interviewer to elaborate a little bit more on the question so you can more understand it. Never be afraid to do that. It's always better to thoroughly understand the question before you go ahead and answer it. It's always better to really understand it before going ahead and saying something that's completely irrelevant to what the interviewer actually wanted to ask you. So anyway, I've got a few examples for you today. Best ones that I've heard. What I would say to prepare for an interview, if you've got one coming up and you think you might have a few nasty surprises along the way, give these a go. Have a go at answering them. Even if they're not relevant, even if there's no chance of these coming up, it will really give you a good frame of mind on how to prepare for these tricky situations. And if you want to get in touch with me at the end and you want to know how I think it's best to answer these questions, just pop me an email. I'll give you the email at the end of the webinar. So first up, my first pool of examples are questions you might get in the kind of more consultancy finance sectors. So they are designed to see if you have a systematic approach to answering questions. So the first one I've got an example of is, how much can a London taxi driver expect to earn on a typical Friday night? We've had that before come up, and it's a really interesting one. Next one, how many golf balls fit in a Boeing 747? And the final one in this category is, how many shoes do you think there are in the world? So with these questions, it's not about the actual answer. So they don't want an exact answer. They don't want you to come away and actually know. Because at the end of the day, no one really knows, to be honest. So the best way to approach these kind of questions is to start by making basic assumptions. And then from that, you can word out your answer and get to a point that you're happy with. And that you can, if you can share with the interviewer how you got to your answer, that's what they're looking for, not the actual answer itself. The next set are some tricky ones that come up very often in interviews when the interviewer wants to point out your weaknesses. So a few examples of this. What are your weaknesses? Number two, what do you feel you need to improve on in a working environment? And number three, I've had this come up before personally. What do you think is your worst quality? And they're always really tricky ones because obviously in an interview, you don't want to be pointing out negative attributes about yourself. But what I would say is use this to your advantage. With these kind of questions, always try and bring it back around to a positive light at the end. So if the answer is maybe, perhaps I'm slightly unorganized. I don't know, I have a messy desk. I find it hard to stay on top of things. You could say and give and provide examples of how you've tried to combat that problem so that you're showing to the interviewer that you've accepted that you've got a weakness, but you're taking positive steps to try and change that. And that's a really great thing to be able to do in an interview. Change things around so that you're always spinning a positive light on your persona and your application. So next set are some very strange scenario ones that I've heard and seen in my time. In these ones, the employer is trying to gauge your personality. And as you can imagine, these questions can come in all sorts of varieties and forms. Again, it's a case of really stopping and thinking about your answer and trying to think of an answer that really reflects you in the best positive light. So we've got, if you were a cereal, what would you be? What's your favorite brand? That's a really popular one amongst marketers if you're going for kind of marketing interview for a marketing role. And the last one is, what 3 items would you take on a desert island? And I'd say in those ones, they're looking for you to be creative. They're looking for you to kind of give examples that are really juicy and flavoursome. For example, what's your favorite brand? Don't just pick Apple, because pretty much 80% of candidates will choose Apple because it's the first thing that pops into their head. Actually think about things that really reflect you and your personality, and give reasons behind them as well. That's what they're really looking for. They're not going to hire you if you say that your favorite brand is something that they don't necessarily agree with. It's not about that. It's not about the answer. It's about how you explain yourself and how you justify your answers. And to wrap up today's webinar, my favorite bit is the really strange ones that I've heard. I went around the office today, I've talked to a few friends and collated my top 5 most awful interview questions I've ever heard. First one, do you think animals have personalities? Where do you even start with that one? I don't know, give it a go. Second, do you believe in ghosts? Perhaps completely irrelevant for the job that you're going for, but someone's had that come up before. Number 3, what would you do if I gave you £1 million tomorrow? And that's quite a tricky one, because I guess what everyone might want to say is throw the world's biggest party, have a great time. But here they're looking for you maybe to be a little bit more structured and actually have a sensible idea of what you would do with that kind of money. So just be careful not to go too crazy with those answers. Number 4 is the classic sell me this stapler. This will be more for kind of sales, business development type roles. And it's a tricky one, but you just need to absolutely go for it and do your absolute best. Have a think about it before you jump into it, but they can be quite fun and they can really kind of showcase your skills and your personality to the employer. The final one, I think, is definitely the trickiest I've heard. Choose a nursery rhyme character and analyze how they could have brought positive change to their situation. Well, that's tricky. I'm not gonna lie, that is the worst one I've ever heard. Where do we even start? What nursery rhyme do you pick? But give it a go, come up with some answers and see how you get along. Anyway, hopefully that's been useful and a bit of fun for today. Good luck. I hope you don't get too bad a question in your upcoming interview. And we're really keen to get some content on a collation of all of our candidates from Instant Impact and the worst ones that you've come across in your time. So feel free to comment on this YouTube video once it goes live on our site, and stay in touch. As always, if you have any questions after this webinar and you want to get in touch for some employability advice, don't hesitate to email webinars@instant-impact.com and we'll get in touch. Anyway, have a fantastic weekend and I hope you're enjoying the weather, and we'll see you soon.